Hi guys, I'm Theresa, and in this video I'm going to be sewing Simplicity 4024, the Dorothy Gale costume. That's a big yawn. Here's a photo. There you go. We're starting on step 11 and finishing the dress and the panties. Part 3 is going to be an accessory video and a costume reveal. So, without further ado, let's get sewing.
Bye.
Bye. Alright, starting with step 11, stitch skirt front to skirt back sections at side seams. You have 3 skirt pieces, 1 front piece, and 2 back pieces. But first, caffeinate, because coffee is life. I fold out the front piece, and I take 1 back piece panel and I make sure that the notches match up, and then pin it together at the side seams only. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll get a toddler tickle in the process. I do the same on the other side, minus the tickle. I take it to my machine and I make sure that the stitch length is set to 1, and I sew the side seams together. If you're wondering what's in my hair, that would be a clover flower that my sweet 5-year-old son picked for me on our walk. I actually forgot it was in my hair until doing this voiceover. And here I'm finishing the seams with my serger. And then I iron the seam down facing the back of the skirt. I flip it over and I iron it on the outside as well. And now I have one really long rectangle, and yes, it is supposed to be that long. Step 12. With the right sides together, fold the skirt band into a tube. Match the cutting lines and notches so that one width of the band extends beyond the edge of each side. Stitch in a 1/4 inch seam and press open. Cut along the bottom of the band and continue cutting in a spiral until the end of the line. The first thing I did is mark the cutting lines onto the fabric. I just weighed it down with rocks and I marked it with chalk. I just finished putting the chalk on the skirt band, and I did a terrible job. The fabric is light and the chalk pulled on it, so I'm just using my lines as a loose guide and hope for the best. Next, you fold it in half and you match the notches. And it's uneven, so you have a little extra on the top and a little extra on the bottom. This part felt a little awkward to me, but just go with it. It works. I pin it together and I sew it down. And then I take it to my pressing mat and I iron the seam open. I don't worry about finishing the raw edges because they won't be exposed, so there's no need. Then I loosely follow the chalk marks that I made. I take my time with the cutting, and I just follow it around and around. And here it is, all ready for step 13.
And here's a bonus dance for you. It's irresistible. I know.
Step 13. Press under 1/4 inch on long edges of skirt band. On outside, pin wrong side of skirt band to skirt, having upper edge of band along broken line. Stitch band close to both long edges. Cut ends of band even with the raw edges of the skirt. Basically, you're just making bias tape. And fair warning, it's tedious work. Then I use the back skirt pattern as a guide. I'm making the half size, so I fold it on the dotted line marked for that size, and then I start pinning right along that folded edge. Then I take it to my machine. I set my stitch length to 2.5, and I sew the band down along the top edge and the bottom edge. Then I clip the extra band off and any loose strings. Step 14. Stitch center back seam of skirt back from lower edge to notch. To gather up edge of skirt 1 inch from back opening edges, stitch along seam line and 1/4 inch inside seam line using a long machine stitch. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is finish the edges of the skirt and finish the raw edges of the bodice so that when it comes time to put the zipper on and all of that, that is done. Before I do that, I'm going to mark where the notches are so that when I sew it together for this step in 14, I will know where to stop. So here I put the chalk lines on the wrong side of the fabric. It's just a quick mark even with the center of the notch. Then I head over to my serger and I finish the raw edges. I sew up from the bottom of the bodice because I don't want any weird bubbles on the waistband. This will flatten it down nicely. And when I'm done, it looks like this. Then I move on to the skirt and I finish the back raw edges. Once both sides have been finished, it's time to sew the gathering stitch. So basically, you sew a basting stitch across the top length of the fabric, and you sew 2 lines. I set my length to 4, and I start sewing. Remember, do not backstitch. Do not cross the stitch lines when you're sewing the second line. It's pretty boring to watch somebody sew a straight line, so here's my beautiful fish, Race Dance. He tries to attack me every time I feed him, but I still love him. When you're done, you'll be able to pull one side of the thread and gather the fabric. But don't do that yet, and don't clip the strings off. First, you need to sew the skirt together. So here I'm matching the skirt bands up with each other with the right sides together. I pin the bottom half up to the chalk line that I did earlier, and I sew it down. The top half remains open, so later you can put the zipper in. And I clip the threads off of the back seam only, and I take the pins out. Then I iron the seams open, and I'm ready for step 15. Step 15. With right sides together, pin skirt to bodice at waistline seam, matching centers and placing seams at small dots on bodice front. Pull up gathering stitches to fit. Distribute fullness evenly. Baste, stitch, press seam toward bodice. Make sure the straps are pinned down and up before you start. Then take your bodice and your skirt and make sure that the right sides are together. I pinned the edges of the back together before I start gathering the fabric. There are 6 points that you want to match up. Match up the back seams, match up the side seams, and the 2 notches in the front. Carefully pin it all together, making sure to match up those 6 points, and you're going to be fine. I use a lot of pins when I gather, mostly so I can skip the basting step and just skip right ahead to sewing it down. If you're nervous about sewing it down, then follow the directions and baste it and then sew it. However, I'm pretty confident that it'll be fine if I just sew it and then use my serger and serge it down and finish the edges on the inside. Here I'm sewing the gathered skirt onto the bodice. When I'm done, I take the pins out and I check my seams. Step 16. Press under 5/8 inch on back opening edges. Pin closed zipper under opening edges with tab end 1 inch below upper edge, having edges meet at center of zipper. Baste. Stitch 1/4 inch each side of center and across the end using an adjustable zipper foot. My daughter's asleep. I'm trying to do this voiceover and not wake her up, so if my voice is a little weird, that is why. Here I'm pressing the seam open to prepare for the zipper. The zipper I have is way too long. Well, I guess it's not that long. I mean, it's just too long. But it's an easy fix. I just lay it on top of the dress and I mark where I want it to end with the tailor's chalk. And then I take it to my table and I use embroidery floss to stop the zipper where I want it to stop. It ends up looking like this. Now it's time to baste the zipper to the dress. Have I mentioned that I hate zippers? Because, yeah, I really hate zippers. I decided to baste it on by hand. I used embroidery floss thinking that it would be easier to take out later, which was not the case. It still took a lot of time. And here's what it looks like basted down. I wish I had some awesome secret for sewing zippers. I don't. So, good luck, and may the odds be ever in your favor. I set my stitch length back to 1, and then I put the zipper foot on before sewing the zipper to the dress. I like to work from the bottom of the zipper and go up, and do that on both sides, working from the bottom up. Now I have to rip out those pesky basting stitches. This was such a pain. The embroidery floss didn't help. It didn't help even a little bit. But eventually I got them all out. It's fine. On outside of collar, center rickrack over seam line with small dots and notches. Baste rickrack in place through center. Place your rickrack on the notched side of the collar and pin it down. Here I'm taking my zipper foot off and I'm putting the regular foot back on, and I sew the rickrack down. Press under 5/8 inch on long unnotched edge of collar. Trim to 1/4 inch. Fold collar along fold line with right sides together. Stitch back edges, trim seam. So here I have it with the right side down. I take the edge with no notches and no rickrack, and I fold it over and iron it down. Then I flip it over right side up, and I fold the collar with the right sides together. I line up the folded edge with the sewing lines on the rickrack, and I pin down the sides before sewing the sides together. Step 19. Turn collar, press. I turn the collar, and then I take a pin and I pick out the corners and iron it flat. Step 20. Clip neck edge of garment to stay stitching along curves. On outside, pin collar to neck edge, matching centers, and placing small dots at shoulder seams. Pull up gathering stitches to fit. Distribute fullness evenly. Baste. Stitch, being careful not to catch in pressed edge of collar. Trim seams, clip curves. Here you match up the notches. I pin it at the notches, and then I make sure that all of the gathers are even before pinning them down. Then I pin the sides of the collar down. Here's what it looks like all pinned together. And then I sew it down. And I take out the pins and I clip the threads. Step 21. Press seam toward collar. Slip stitch pressed edge of collar over seam matching centers. Here I'm pinning it down so it won't move around while I slip stitch. I start to hand sew it, but yeah. You're supposed to hand stitch the inside of the collar down. My kids were fighting. I'm really feeling the pressure to finish this project, so I stitched in the ditch of the seam instead. I'm not proud of it. It's not as pretty, but sometimes you gotta stitch in the ditch, and that is what I did. Here I'm attempting to stitch in the ditch, or in the seam line. I really didn't do a good job, but honestly, I don't care. If anyone notices, they're way too close to my daughter for comfort, and that's not going to happen. Step 22. Sew hook and eye to back opening edges of collar. On outside, pin the loose ends of the shoulder straps to the waistband, matching small dots. Sew one button to each strap at small dots. Tack each strap to the waistband. Step 23. Mark hem length, press up hem along marking. Mark depth of hem, trim evenly. Press under 1/4 inch on raw edge, stitch close to inner pressed edge. I just eyeballed it. I folded the raw edges up and ironed it. I folded it up again to the length that I wanted, and then I ironed it down. If you are detail oriented and you want to be precise, you can measure and mark it with the tailor's chalk, or you can use one of these tools here to measure as you go. It doesn't matter how you go about it, as long as it gets done. Then I set my stitch length to 2.5 and I sewed it down. And here's the dress. It's done. Now I need to make the diaper cover. They put all of the directions for the panties into one step. Stitch center front and center back seams of panties. Stitch inner leg seam. To form waistline and leg casing of panties, press 3/4 inch on upper and leg edges to inside. Press under 1/4 inch on raw edges. Stitch close to inner edges of casings, leaving an opening on each casing to insert elastic. Cut a piece of elastic to fit waist, plus 1 inch. Cut a piece of elastic the length of elastic guide for each leg. Insert elastic through casings, adjust to fit, stitch ends of elastic together securely. Stitch opening closed. First thing I do is mark the back side of the panties with the tailor's chalk. Then I pin them together with the right sides together, matching the back to the back and the front to the front. This is going to be the center seam of the panties. I move my stitch length back to 1 and I sew the 2 center seams together. I serge the raw edges together so they won't fray. Once that is done, I take it over to my pressing mat and I take out the pins. Then I open it up and match the front center seams with the back center seam, still with the right sides together. I pin it, and then I sew it and serge it. Now it's time to make the casing for the elastic. I fold over the raw edge just a little and I iron it down. And then I fold it over again around 1 inch or so and I iron it down. I start to pin it and then I decide to take a small loop of a ribbon and put it in the back seam to mark the back of the panties. I pin it in place and I continue to pin around the waistband. I take it to my sewing machine and I sew it down. Don't forget to leave an opening for your elastic. I clip the thread. Here's the hole. Then I do the same thing for both the leg pieces, minus the ribbon tag. I'm only showing one leg though. I take it to my machine, I sew it down. Be sure to leave an opening for the elastic. And then, on all 3 openings, I top stitch near the edge because I like how that looks once it has the elastic in it. It looks like this before the elastic. Then I put the elastic in. I use a safety pin to guide it through. I also pin the end so it doesn't get sucked into the casing. I don't have this pictured, but I measured it on my daughter and I added like a little bit extra, like 3/4 of an inch or so. And when you measure it, don't stretch it on your child, just lightly put it around their waist really. Then I sew the elastic together and I sew the opening. I do the same for the leg holes. And it's completely done. So stay tuned. I'll post part 3, the costume reveal. It should hopefully be pretty short and cute, just like my daughter. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with all of you. And I hope you stick around, subscribe. Thanks for watching. And if you've made it this far, leave me a comment and let me know, because I'd love to see that. I know these are pretty long. It's been a lot of work, so I do really appreciate every like and comment that my videos get. Anywho, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later. Bye!